So last time we talked about bringing NPCs to life with voices and such. Now I'm going to talk about just bringing them to life at all. And the first thing to realize is if you want to make your world into a living, breathing world, as close to real as this world is, this physical world that our bodies and our possessions and things are in. Every day we wake up, we open our eyes in this world we call Earth, and there are over 7 billion other people. And in order to make your world feel that way, whether it's a homebrew world or Forgotten Realms or Magic the Gathering world like Ravnica or Theros or whatever world you want to bring to life, some other game that's not D&D, you have to remember that there are billions of other people, and they're living their lives. They're trying to pay bills, they're trying to feed their children, they're pursuing romantic interests, they're trying to explore who they are, or they're just trying to survive horrible circumstances or whatever. There's all sorts of things people do. And these NPCs, they don't know they're NPCs. Okay, they don't. They don't know that your player character group is special because there's people in a place called the real world playing them. And, and they're rolling dice and everything. Your NPCs, they don't know they're NPCs. They need to be real people. And how do we do that? Well, the way to make your NPCs like real people is to base them on real people. So I'm going to tell a story about my father. My father's in his 80s, and some people who've met my father, some of us suspect that he might just be somebody who, when he grew up, there may not have been so much awareness of that kind of thing. He may be a walking case of undiagnosed Asperger's. But I noticed when I was growing up, as his son, I noticed that my dad treated people like archetypes. That when I was growing up, he had an archetype in his mind, like that I would call Johnny's little friend. And he treated all my friends that way. And I noticed that whenever my dad interacts with anyone, he's not really perceiving them as a person. He's like labeling them. Like you'd put a stat block on top of an NPC. This is my soldier stat block. This is my merchant stat block. This is my blacksmith stat block. And so, for example, when my dad goes through the checkout counter, he sort of just has a label in his mind, checkout counter person. And he would treat them all the same. Whereas you and I might pick up on the things that make us all individual people. So really easy one. If you're the checkout counter, you can really tell the difference between a person who's at the end of their shift and their feet probably hurt, and they may have had to deal with at least one or two rude people that day, and they're thinking about all the things they have to do when they get home, and they're probably hungry, if somebody, end of their shift, and maybe it's past the end of their shift, and their boss is making them stay over because the next person is late and there's nobody to take over. So that person is going to be in a completely different state of mind when they interact with people than maybe that fresh, perky person who just got in and their shift just started, and boy, howdy, isn't it a great, beautiful day? Those are both checkout people in the checkout line at the store. But you can have to use a game term here, because we talk about having encounters in a role-playing game, you can have a vastly different encounter with those two checkout people, the perky fresh one and the tired one. And so if we relate our experiences of being a person in real life and dealing with other people in real life, when we apply this to the NPCs, that really can be an easy way to flesh them out and make them more real. Is just to give them feelings and motivations just like we see people have in real life. There's a gentleman who taught me how to DM. His name is Ron Watson, and he taught me everything I knew about DMing to get started. In the original Game Shop's basement that our brand is named after, he was like the man. And he would actually base NPCs off of real people. Now, nobody contemporary, okay? Nobody that was in his life at that time. But, like, he would base NPCs off of old bosses that he had. Like, if he really needed an NPC who was a jerk, he would base an NPC off of an old jerky boss that he had. So, we've met enough people in our real lives that we can come up with people that would be fairly realistic, the way they sound, the way they talk, the way they act. So if you had mages in a mage school, a lot of people are Harry Potter fans. I like the Principalities of Glantry. Those of you who might be in my games at startplaying.games know that's my big thing, is they have a magic school at Glantry years before. I'm sure J.K. Rowling was a very young girl when Glantry came out. And then in a couple months from now, there's going to be a D&D hardback on Strixhaven, which is like Magic the Gathering's answer to having a mage school. So, but if we were going to have like a school campaign, I'm pretty sure that you have had enough teachers in your life, or been around enough teachers, that you could come up with some realistic ways that teachers would be as an NPC, and not just the same one. Like, this is my teacher stat block, this is how teacher NPCs act. But we know different kinds of teachers. There's the cool teacher, there's the laid-back teacher, there's the teacher that's overwhelmed and lets the students walk all over them. There's the teacher that's like super strict jerk. There's the teacher that's like super strict. They are strict, but they're not necessarily a jerk about it. They're fair, like strict but fair. And that's like 5 different NPCs right there. And they're all teachers. There's the strict but fair and respectable, and there's the strict but jerky, and then there's the one that lets their students walk all over them, and then there's the cool fun one, and then there's just the laid back one. I mean, that's 5 right there. I mean, I could even, now that my brain is going like that, I even had a teacher when I was in high school who was kind of like a raging alcoholic. We don't know how he didn't get fired, but he was like drunk in class and stuff. I could tap my memories of him, and I could come up with an NPC teacher. So by making your NPCs, by basing them on real people, and how real people act, and how real people talk, and the attitudes and the beliefs, and just the places where they're coming from in life, how they feel, what their motivations are, why they do what they do. This makes, to me, this is much more important than the silly voices. I mean, the silly voices are fun and everything. And the accents, or when the NPC comes up to your party and says, "Y'all talk funny." I mean, you can play around with your voices and your accents all you want. And it's cool. It's a thing, but it's more important to flesh out your NPCs and make sure they seem like people. We all play these games for different reasons. We all get different dopamine hits in our brains from playing these games. What I like to do, both as a DM and a player, is, as a player I like to experience it, as a DM I like to try to create it for the people, is like a simulated world. Like if you were an elf Eldritch Knight fighter. If you'd been born in that world, and that's what you were. Or if you were, a dwarf assassin rogue. Or if you were like a minotaur berserker barbarian. Like if that world was real and you really were these things, I want to simulate life. What your adventures, your downtime, your not only your interaction with PCs, but your interactions with NPCs. There's been characters at our table over the years that have gotten married to NPCs and then had kids with NPCs. And characters who become rulers of kingdoms are collecting taxes from NPCs. And, if you give the NPCs realistic motivations, the NPCs in somebody's kingdom, they could have a tax revolt because, it's like, we can't afford these taxes. What are you doing? We can't feed our families. That gets into a whole different type of adventuring than door-to-door dungeon crawl or something. You start having characters like ruling kingdoms and stuff. Then you could have like a spreadsheet for your kingdom and start having tax revenue and stuff like that. And you can do anything with D&D. But if you start having the NPCs act like real people, and remember, NPCs don't know they're NPCs. It's a very common trope, and I'll kind of close with this. It's a very common trope in adventures for an NPC to say something like, "Oh yes, many adventurers have tried this quest before. What makes you think you're going to succeed?" And when I was in college, there were some smart alecky players, because we're the PCs. We're supposed to succeed. The story's written for us to succeed. Well, yes, but the universe doesn't know that. The Forgotten Realms or Mystara or your homebrew campaign, that universe doesn't know that we're the PCs. There are people in a place called the real world that are playing us, and rolling dice for our actions. Like, no, the universe doesn't know that. NPCs don't know they're NPCs. They think they're people, and they act like people. And the more you can get your NPCs to act like people, the more you can make your world seem like a real place that we all just travel in our imaginations, or like SpongeBob would say, imagination, and travel with our friends in our imagination once in a while. So, bring your NPCs to life. Base them on real people. I've even, based NPCs on people like ex-girlfriends and stuff. I mean, I'm not naming names or anything, but the point is anybody. So, the key to making NPCs people is to study and base them on people. All right, until next time, I'll see you in game.